Chavre, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark, und freilich, begashmis und berichtnis. I hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy physically and spiritually. As usual, since the war started, we added tzedakah. So first of all, here's tzedakah. We're giving tzedakah, gdeilut tzedakah, shemakareves segula, in the honor of this tzedakah. Mashiach should come now. We're also saying a prayer. I just want to say we started the Rebbe's new kapitel. This week was Yud Aleph Nisan, the birthday of the Rebbe, and there's a kapitel we started now is kapitel Kuf Chaf Daled 124. And I want to tell you, anybody who's feeling down or needs an injection to be uplifted and inspired, just read Psalm 124. It's amazing. So we mentioned this already last week. It's all about empowerment and survival and overcoming all adversity, the triumph of any challenge. So one of the psukim there is Baruch Adinoi Shalei Nisananu Teref L'Shineim. Baruch Hashem. That's Baruch Hashem. Thank Hashem. Thank you Hashem. Blessed is Hashem, who did not make us quarry for their teeth. So we have the enemies. The point is, we're in the jaws of the crocodile. We're in the jaws of the lion, and even we're in the jaws, and the teeth are already surrounding us. That's how close we are to the danger. Nevertheless, Hashem saves us all the time. As we say by the Haggadah, Shal Pesach, now's not the time to get into it, but this year it's been repeated so many times. V'hi sha'amda lanu v'laviseinu, that b'chol dei v'der oimdim aleinu l'chaliseinu v'akadosh baruch hu matzilenu miyodam. That's one of the central themes of Pesach, how a Jew is a different category. The lamb surrounded by 70 wolves. And it's astonishing that in the Haggadah that was written thousands of years ago, they put in this V'hi sha'amda, and it is as true today as it ever was before, without a shadow of a doubt. So Baruch Hashem, thank you Hashem for the Jewish survival, the Jewish power, the Jewish endurance, etc. Read the kapitel. So we did charity, we said a prayer, now we'll get to the Parshas Shavua. Today, first off, is Yud Gimel Nisan, which is the Yom Hilula Stalkus of the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe. So I immediately want to bring down his blessing to everybody. The Chol B'nai Yisrael B'chol Makom She'em should get blessed in the merit of the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek. This week's Parshas Tzav. It's also Shabbos HaGodel, the Shabbos before Pesach. It's called Shabbos HaGodel, the great Shabbos. And we had Yud Aleph Nisan, as we mentioned before. And the Parsha Shavua is Tzav. So there's many things that we have to connect, which is the concept, a message for Yom Tov, for Pesach, a lesson that we learned from Parshas Tzav, and from Yud Aleph Nisan, the Rebbe's birthday. So I must confess, I looked into the Parsha and I saw a mitzvah which then is explained by the Sefer HaChinuch, and I could not find something which is so directly connected to the subject theme that we have to discuss today, which is top level of service. Now, the mitzvah I'm going to talk about is the mitzvah which is called Mitzvahs Korban Mincha Shel Kohen Gadol B'chol Yom. The high priest, the Kohen Gadol, brought a grain offering every single day. It's also called Mitzvahs Chavitei Kohen Gadol, which is mentioned in this week's parsha. So let's first read the verse. Zeh Korban Aaron uvonav asher yakrivu l'Hashem b'yom yimashach ha'isoi. This was the sacrifice that Aaron and his sons would bring on the day when they became anointed and initiated into the service, etc. So it's very interesting. Rashi brings it out straight away. There was the Kohen Gadol who brought this every single day, the high priest, and there was a Kohen Hedyot. He only brought this carbon on the day where he became initiated into the service. Now, there is a Sikha of the Rebbe in chapter 22 of the Sikhas, which talks about a very famous debate whether this carbon is considered a carbon tzibur or a carbon yachid, which fits very much also with the idea of what a leader is. that he's intertwined and interlocked with the nation. We're not going to get into that sikha. Today I'm going to speak about another sikha, and I'll tell you soon where I took it from. But first, let's talk about the concept. Now, what is the concept? What's the reason for this mitzvah? Why does the Kohen Gadol have to bring this korban every single day? And over here, the Sefer HaChinuch, which I never discovered the Sefer HaChinuch before, and I love the Sefer HaChinuch, but this one I didn't know about, and I'm so happy that I found it. It is so amazing. And he writes as follows, that's what I'm going to read it to you inside. Mishar Shea Mitzvah, what's the root of the mitzvah, the theme of the mitzvah, the concept of the mitzvah? Lefi Kohen HaGodel, because the Kohen HaGodel hu Hashliach, he's the emissary. Ben Yisrael Avim Sheb'Shamayim, between Hashem and the nation. Kloimar ki hu anoisei tvila elov badam, he prays to Hashem on behalf of the Jewish people. V'alidei tfilosav u'maisei korbanosov hei miskapim, and through his prayers and the sacrifices that he brings, the Jewish nation is forgiven. And therefore, roi lish kazeh, it's appropriate for such a person, lish like korban miyuchid, he should have a unique, special sacrifice, Tamidi, constantly, kamoi tamidi atzibur, like the sacrifice of the whole congregation. And he brings out afterwards, this is meant to arouse him, kol machshavosov, to make him more focused. V'yosem daite v'kavanasi eitzel Hashem yizborech, eitzel Hashem baruch hu, it puts him into the zone of the spirituality. Ulaman zois yoyel loy v'lahem, and therefore will help him and the nation. And he writes, "Ve'ein sofek, there's no doubt about it. Shein doime esaydes ha'adam k'shamakev karbonei ha'miyuchad loy, l'chshamakev korban shumishutef imoy." You can't compare somebody who's bringing a korban by himself to somebody who brings a korban that's connected to others when he knows that it's about himself and it's all him standing before the Eibishter. That means he has to rise, demand from himself to reach the highest level. When somebody thinks about something which is specifically directed to him and demanded of him, that inspires him in an incomparable way, than of something that he feels is demanded from everyone. And the Chinuch writes, you won't have to elaborate. So, the Abarbanel writes it a bit differently, and I'll tell you what he says. The Abarbanel mentions that if the Kohen Gadol is going to bring atonement for the rest of the nation, so he has to have an atonement himself. Because the one who is going to bring atonement, he himself has to be atoned, so to speak. You know, ein chovesh matar atzmo, a person himself is in the dirt, can't bring cleanliness to somebody else, so to speak. But either way, whether we learn the pshat like the Abarbanel or according to the Chinuch, that he himself is the messenger, he himself is the conduit, the Kohen Gadol, so therefore he has to be always on the highest spiritual level. It comes out to the same point, which I want to talk about today, which is connected to your Alf Nissen. First off, what is a tzaddik? What is a rebbe? So, and what is a leader? And how do we see in this mitzvah the number one ingredient which is demanded of every leader and every great person? And we spoke about it many times, and that is humility. If we know of a leader that doesn't have humility, then he's not really a leader. And he's not really a great person. I'm sorry, we're talking the Jewish definition. And that's the point over here. Here the Torah informs us, the Kohen HaGadol, he's the one who has to bring this korban every single day. And this korban is definitely something where he's making a reckoning, an inner reckoning. And that's what, according to the Chinuch, means he's looking inside himself how to become closer and to become aroused he has to arouse himself spiritually before he can arouse the nation. That's exactly what the carbon is. Every single day, the Kohen Gadol, the highest spiritual person, has to once again arouse and ignite that feeling inside of himself of going stronger, of going higher, of demanding even more from himself. So it's the ultimate humility. He's standing before Hashem, offering a sacrifice, bringing himself closer, and obviously it makes him even more humble. And the idea is that he's not perfect, and especially according to the Ramban, according to the Barbanel, that he has to worry and think all the time that he should be in a state of atonement in case he did anything wrong. So the lashon of the chinuch is unbelievable. And here we see the idea of people sometimes who don't know anything about Yiddishkeit, and they talk about the idea of a Rebbe or a leader, and they say, wow, he gets so much respect. People surround him, and he has so many people that are under him. They don't know the first thing about Jewish leadership. As the Pesach says, Vayaminu b'Hashem, the nation believed in Hashem, Uva Moshe Avdoi. We're calling Moshe a servant of Hashem. The whole reason why the nation respected Moshe Rabbeinu, because they saw him as a servant of Hashem and as someone who serves the people. So the idea is that a Moshe Rabbeinu is completely selfless, and he's a role model of selflessness. And because he's a role model of selflessness, therefore he brings us closer to the Hashem. And this is the idea, by the way, this is what I'm going to say, the Sikha the Rebbe, in Chelik, I think it's Chelik Yotes Shreiftim, where the Rebbe talks about the idea of the leader as being the mind, the head, and the heart of the Jewish people. There's a concept where we have Rebbe. The word Rebbe is an acronym of Rosh B'nai Yisrael, the head of the nation, the head of the Jewish people. But there's also what the Rambam says, that Melech is Libay Leiv Kol Yisrael. The king was the heart of the nation. So the truth is, it's two dimensions in the leader itself. Both of them, by the way, show how the impact and the influence of the leader is in the entire nation. The head leads, and just like Gufa Bosa Reisha Ozel, the body follows the head. The head is influencing the entire body through nerve endings, through whatever you want to call it. Meir Shalt al Lev, the brain even dominates over the heart. But then we say Liba Palag Chol Shaifen, the heart is pumping blood throughout the entire body. The body cannot exist without the brain or without the heart. And they impact and influence the entire body. And they're the vital organs. But the point is, the Rebbe in that Sikha brings out the idea of the heart, brings out more the idea of the humility, how he's serving the people. Because by the heart, it's when you look at the heart, you see the heart as an organ which is pumping outward constantly. Like, for the people, for the people, for the people, for the people. When we look at the physical brain, the fact is the brain leads. But we don't see that in the physical way, how it's out producing, pumping outward to serve the people as much as the concept of the heart. In any case, in both cases, the point is, what we're discussing is that the whole reason why this is a brain is to serve the body, the person. The whole reason why there's a heart is to serve the person, the body. And that's the same idea in the Jewish concept of leadership, that it's all about serving. That's the point. The leader is somebody who's completely selfless and is there to serve, not that he lords over other people. Now, what does this have to do with us? First of all, let's talk about the lesson that we have to take in our own life as fathers, every one of us as leaders or teachers or educators. So the first thing you have to know is you have to be a role model. That's what we learned from this mitzvah of bringing the carbon of the Kohen Gadol every single day. Many parents went by the Rebbe for dollars, and they asked the Rebbe about, a bracha of something. How can I bring my kids closer to Judaism? And the Rebbe, without fail, I can't even think of one time that the Rebbe didn't tell the person the best way is by being a role model. Not by instructing, not by commanding, but just by being a role model. Be a living example. Don't practice what you preach. So don't preach so much, just practice it, and that will influence your children in the most powerful way. Now, the same thing we see by the Rebbe, obviously the Rebbe demanded from himself, and that brought out the best of all the people that were the Hasidim. If you have a leader that's standing on his feet for I don't know how many hours, 7 hours on a Sunday morning, and distributing dollars to people, and meanwhile he's fasting, he's just having drinks of water or liquid. He drank before he went to the oil to visit the grave of the holy site of his father-in-law. So he was standing on his feet at the age of 85, 90, distributing dollars to thousands of people with all the patience in the world, not telling one person no, but listening to whatever they have to say and giving them a blessing. And then he would first go to the oil, travel to Queens from Brooklyn, still standing on his feet, also continuing to stand on his feet. So when you thought about that, what the Rebbe does for the people, that is completely selfless, so then obviously it brings out in us the similar thing. And this is what Moshe Rabbeinu says, that his whole life was miyot chelbi v'dami. By the way, there's an expression in English that I like very much, and it's beautiful. I don't know if I ever mentioned this before. Officers eat last. What does it mean, officers eat last? When you come to the lunchroom or to the dining room, and you have the captain or the sergeant, and you have the soldiers that are under him. So one approach could be, I go to the head of the line, because they should know respect for me. Or the opposite is true. Officers eat last. First they make sure that every one of the soldiers that are under them have the food, and then they look after, they make sure that they have the food. I'm just saying the idea is of selflessness. So the same thing is over here, but the spiritual idea means when it comes to demanding of yourself, demand from yourself always more. When you demand from yourself more, it brings out more by your followers. So that's the connection between Yud Aleph Nisan and this week's Parsha, which is obvious. And now let's go to Pesach. According to Chassidus, there is Tishrei and there's Nisan, there's the Avodah of Rosh Hashanah and the Avodah of Tishrei, and then there's Pesach. And it's explained that Tishrei is more the Avodah of Balei Tshuva. That's why the words of the month Tishrei, the letters are Tov Shin. We start with the last 2 letters of the Aleph Beis. But Pesach is in Chodesh HaOviv, Oviv. The festival is spring. Oviv starts with Aleph Beis. Because in Pesach, the novelty, the Chiddush was that we're all on the level of tzaddikim. Like Hashem made our slate clean by Hashem. In other words, He just took us out of 49 portals of impurity when we were in Egypt. And then, in 1 second, we reached the highest level. That's the idea of Pesach. In other words, in practical terms, what that means is that Emir Hashem, this year, Leil Tezvav Nisan, Motzei Shabbos is the only night of the year where a Yid can go from 0 to 1,000 in 1 second without any preparation. That's the beauty and the enormity of the night of Pesach. That all of us could reach the level of Avodas HaTzadikim. Avodas HaTzadikim means next level, immediately. But obviously, if we're talking about it, that means we should inculcate ourselves with this idea that we do want to rise in the ranks, which means to constantly demand of ourselves more to become better. So we're going to cry out to Hashem to help us on the night of Pesach, because that's special. It's Avodas HaTzadikim, without years and years of work. And it happens. Miracles happen on that night. But at the same time, the lesson is that we're interested in spirituality, and we're interested in climbing in spirituality, and we're interested in rising more and more and greater. Not because I have to become a general, but because it means to get closer and closer. Like we're talking about the mitzvah of the Kohen Gadol, every single day is being a korban. Okay, so that's what it says about Pesach, and I think there's a word that I once repeated before from the Kotzke, which I love very much, and it says, "Upasach Hashem ala Pesach." What does it mean in the verse that Hashem passed over the doors? So the literal meaning is Hashem passed over the doorways of the Jewish people, and there was nobody died from the Jews on the night of Pesach. The Kotzke said, "Apel Shavot, Upasach Hashem skipped over, he passed over ala Pesach, over the rule that he himself made, which Hashem says, Pischuli kechudish hamachat, open for me up the hole of a needle, and I will make it greater." So it means that the rule is, you have to do something. If you do something, then I'll do the rest of it. The night of Pesach, Hashem overrides even that rule. Even if you did nothing, Hashem will still do something epic for you. But we have to connect to that spirit to realize what the night of Pesach is. Wow. Even if you did nothing, Hashem will do amazing things for you. Amen, Ken Yiratzon, for everyone. So, this idea, I mean, for me personally, when I think about tzaddikim and rebbes and what they demanded from themselves, it inspires, because that itself is a wonder when you think to yourself, what is the avodah of a tzaddik? It's a very interesting discussion. You know, like someone's going to ask, okay, tell me, describe to me how a rebbe or a tzaddik is in a different level. So obviously we're not going to reach any of those levels. But nevertheless, when we have an awareness and a consciousness of this idea of levels of spirituality, it brings us, in us also, that idea to rise higher and to demand from us more. So one story I think I said many times is a story with the Frierdiker Rebbe. I'm not going to say the details now, that the Rebbe, before he became Rebbe, went to greet the Frierdiker Rebbe, who was coming from Chicago. And the previous Rebbe said that he's fasting. And why was he fasting? And he said, well, Kovid Dafman Obdarn. Honor has to be, I don't even know how to translate it properly. Obdarn means to thin it out, to fast. So he was fasting because he had received honor. He went to Chicago, the previous Rebbe went to Chicago, and there he received honor. People came to greet him and gave him respect. So therefore, when he came back to New York, he was telling the Rebbe that he had to do something. Like Obdan means like to shed, to shed whatever pleasure, so to speak, he would have received from people giving him honor. So he had to fast to shed the weight of that respect that he received. Now, I don't know what to tell you, my friends. When you think about that, a holy person who doesn't have an ounce of ego, and he's fasting because he got respect. Wow. What does that tell me? How I have to look at myself and demand for myself. Do I have humility? What's my level of humility? If the Frierdiker Rebbe is the one who's worried about getting respect because it might feed some sort of ego which he doesn't have, which is non-existent. So what does that tell me about myself and how much I have to demand of myself? Now we're talking about tzaddikim, and we're talking about the kohenim, and their whole life is about serving the public and giving of themselves. So, and by the way, this is the idea of Shabbos HaGodel. Shabbos HaGodel means, now we're talking spiritually, just like when it comes to physical things, people always want more. That's the way it is. The Gemara says, Mishesh Lemonar Eitz Messiah, whoever has 100 wants 200. So, hello, when it comes to spiritual things, think the same way. How many svarim are you finishing this year? 1? Say you want to finish 2 svarim. How many mesachtas are you finishing this year? 1. You want to finish 2 Masechtas. Think big, as they say. Go big or go home. And that's Shabbos HaGodol. And that's Pesach. Pesach means dilug. The Avodah of Pesach means not crawling, not walking, not running, but leaping, as we spoke many times. Next level. And that's the Avodah of the Kohen Gadol. Bring out the Kohen Gadol in each and every single one of us. But the foundation starts with a selflessness. It's not about you. It's about what Hashem wants of you. And that's what Hashem wants of you. To bring out your full potential of who you really are, which is limitless. I want to finish with the story of the Rebbe, which I don't think I ever said this story before, which brings out again the beauty of a leader and also demands of ourselves how we should be so in sync, in touch with another person. Rabbi Muttel Gutnick from Melbourne, Australia, recounts a story that when he was a young man in the early 70s, in Crown Heights there's something called the Pagisha. It's a Shabbos where college students come from around the United States of America to spend the Shabbos in Crown Heights. So we had 2 girls who were staying in his house for Shabbos in, I think, North Carolina or South Carolina. And they were so curious, and they spoke the whole time about Yiddishkeit and Shabbos and Kashrus and everything. What's Chassidim, what's Judaism. Anyways, at the end of the meal, they put down ice cream. So one of the girls asked Rabbi Gutnick, "What's this? We just spoke before about kashrus and the separation of milk and meat, and now you're putting down ice cream. We just had meat, and this is dairy." So Rabbi Gutnick's wife and Rabbi Gutnick explained to them there's such a thing called parav ice cream, which is an ice cream that's not made out of dairy products. Anyways, a couple of weeks later, he got a letter from both of these girls. "Thank you very much. The Shabbos we stayed in your house was amazing. We really loved it. It was beautiful." And they both signed their names, the 2 girls. And then under that, one of them wrote, "P.S. I told my mother about the parava ice cream, and she is very curious about it. Please send the chocolate ice cream recipe." Okay. Rabbi Gutnick read this letter that they were saying, "Thank you, we enjoyed Crown Heights," and they were by a Farbrengen of the Rebbe, and they were very inspired from Judaism. He decided he's going to send this letter into the Rebbe to give the Rebbe nachas. You know, many people write to the Rebbe, they're called Tzav Chassidim, to have problems. And it's sometimes painful subjects, and the Rebbe carries the weight and the burden of everybody. So he decided he's going to send a letter to the Rebbe that he would, bring a smile to the Rebbe, give him a nachas. So he sent this letter to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe answered on this letter, "Tach al absura teva." Thank you very, very much for the good news. And then the Rebbe wrote, "Lahamshich kishura liyahadus." Continue her connection to Yiddishkeit, ba'oifen hamasim la, in a way which is suitable and befitting for her. And the Rebbe made an arrow from those words, ba'oifen hamasim la, continue her connection to Judaism in a way which is befitting for her. And the Rebbe made an arrow, and he made the arrow to the words, "P.S. Please send me the chocolate ice cream recipe." So Rabbi Gutnick was saying that the most important, the greatest advice he ever received about working with people and being a leader was this, how the Rebbe wrote, you should guide that person like Chanech Lanal, Pidarkoi, guide that person in a way which is appropriate for that person. Today we use the language Basher Husham, where he's holding. But here you have the leader, the Rebbe, a great, unfathomable level of holiness. And he's making an arrow to the chocolate ice cream recipe and giving that message to Rabbi Gutnick that that's how you're meant to bring her closer to Yiddishkeit. She appreciates chocolate ice cream. And this is something that she remembers also from the meal that she spent Shabbos in your house. So that's what it means when you're dealing with somebody. Obviously, we give them the ultimate truth, and obviously we don't give them something diluted or less than truth. But at the same time, you have to lower yourself to be able to go into the mindset of the person that you're dealing with, and then speak a language which is going to connect with that person, etc., etc. So this is an amazing lesson for all of us in our roles as leaders. Number one, we're role models and living examples of whatever the values and the virtues of what we stand for in Yiddishkeit, etc. But at the same time, we're also sensitive to wherever the person that we're dealing with is holding, to do it in such a way that brings that person closer. We should all be redeemed and liberated from any worries, any anxieties, any tension, whatever it is, at every single level. We should have the Geula Mitzvah Shlema taken from Yad Mamish, posting from my home, Be'ez Hashem Yisborach, your man in Melbourne.